Turnbull government's already in strife trying to defend the decision of Fair Work Australia to cut Sunday penalty rates for hospitality and retail workers. But today it came under more fire from Labor for now telling Fair Work to also be careful about raising the minimum wage too much. And not surprisingly, Labor is again accusing the government of being mean to workers when the government's actually trying to make sure workers aren't priced out of jobs. But that's a hard sell. Made even harder when the government told Fair Work that many low-paid workers were actually from high-income homes, perhaps wives or children earning that bit extra. And worse, when Workplace Minister Michaelia Cash was asked 10 times today by 3AW's Neil Mitchell to say how many exactly were from rich homes, she was all over the shop. Here's just the bit of that train wreck.
How many of the 200,000 people struggling along on $17.70 an hour are coming from high-income households? How relevant is the minimum wage in that case?
Oh, look, can I tell you, the minimum wage is absolutely relevant, and no one denies that.
Minister, you don't have a figure here, do you?
No.
You don't?
It's not that we don't have a figure.
Well, you do have a figure. Give it to me.
It's very much about you need to look at the minimum wage review as a whole.
But you've put this argument that many of the people on the lowest wage are actually coming from wealthier households.
Okay.
Now, how many of them? That's a simple point.
Okay.
How many? What percentage?
No, okay. I don't have the figure. Okay.
In fact, the figures were in the government's own submission. 1 in 10 workers on the minimum wage live in the wealthiest 20% of households. Joining me is the panel, Parnell McGuinness, writer and director of communications agency Thoughtbroker, and Bruce Hawker, former Labor campaign guru and head of the Campaigns and Communications Group. Thanks to you both. Bruce, should Michaelia Cash have known that figure, or was she wiser to actually forget it?
Well, Andrew, I think she should have known it because it was part of the government's case. But when she didn't know it, I think she probably would have been much better off just fessing up straight away and saying, look, I don't have that number, but and let's move on, rather than allowing Neil Mitchell to ask her 10 times what it was. That was where it became cringeworthy. And, of course, that's when the whole story took off. If she'd had the number, then she could have actually made a case. There is a case to be made, and she didn't really make it effectively. Although, on the other side of the coin, we're all talking about it now. So, the government, in a weird sort of way, in a very weird sort of a way, has made a point today, but not the way I think they expected to.
This is funny. I'm going to be taking up almost a Labor case, which I think Bruce has got a bit rusty. but here's the case, Parnell. The fact that 1 in 10 of the people on the minimum wage, right, are from wealthier households does not mean that we should be any less concerned by the impact on those that are actually on their bare bones of their backside on the minimum wage. I mean, it's just to say, just because some are rich doesn't mean we shouldn't worry about the effect on the very poor.
Sure, absolutely, Andrew. But that's also why we have a transfer state in Australia. And that's one of the things that can be addressed by that means. You've got to remember that the effective minimum wage is always zero. So without wages at the right price, affordable for businesses, there are no jobs. So in order to have people in work, you really do need to be keeping the minimum wage at an affordable rate for businesses. And that's the case that the government need to be making in this. Now, slipping up on a figure in a sort of gotcha journalism moment, I think is been a big distraction in this case, where it's a really important point that the government needs to be prosecuting.
No, look, and that's right. And all the government's doing is what Labor's done in the past, saying, be mindful, don't price workers out of jobs. An increase in minimum pay is great for those that have them, terrible for ones that lose them. But, Bruce, nevertheless, we are having, Labor is cunningly preparing a very powerful image of the government wanting to cut workers' wages or keep them low, particularly the poorest, while wanting a big tax cut for big business. Is that fair, or what the hell is fair in politics? Is it effective?
Well, it's effective, that's for sure, because people are quite prepared to see business get a cut in taxes if they think that everybody's enjoying the benefits of, you know, the boom in the economy or whatever. We're in a different cycle now where it's much tougher for people. The government's trying to cut back on a lot of these benefits and at the same time give business a break. Now, people look at that and they say, well, why should those people in business, who quite often are foreign businesses and probably aren't even particularly committed to Australia, getting these breaks when we're still having to dig deeper into our pockets, or we're being denied benefits like, you know, cuts to pensions? That's the problem the government's got. You can do it, you know, when John Howard was Prime Minister and everything was going well, and you can get into this business of middle-class welfare, which is where the problem really started in the first place, that they're trying to deal with now.
I'm starting to buy that now, Bruce.
Yeah,
I'm starting to buy that. You were saying at the time, and I'm starting to buy your argument, because we now see the hell that comes when you try to wind it back when you really need that money.
Yeah.
But Parnell, I just wonder whether the government is missing something by not getting tougher on the global warming scare, because we've just had 700 workers out of a job because global warming policies have helped force shut the Hazlewood power station. We just talked to one of them here. Is this really worth it? Because it makes zero difference to the world's temperature.
Yeah, look, I think we really have to take it away from this discussion, though, of an is it or isn't it on the global warming discussion. What we really need to be looking at is the ridiculous situation we've got in our economy, where we're giving subsidies and incentives and grants and all kinds of things all over the place, based a lot of the time on companies lobbying their way into a competitive advantage and changing regulation. And out of that, what we get is a system which is completely confused, where the market actually can't function to get the right price of the commodity to the consumer. It's pushing up prices, it's pushing up power prices, and it's costing people jobs. It's just an unacceptable situation.
Yeah, but it's all for nothing. That's what I keep coming back to. It is all for nothing.
But Andrew, you say it's all for nothing, but if every power plant in the world that's pushing out dirty emissions, as sadly Hazlewood has been.
Not dirty, Bruce. It's not about carbon emissions. It's about carbon dioxide.
Well, it's dirty, and the company that made the decision, to close Hazlewood, did it because they were moving towards low carbon emissions in their business plan, and that's happening all around the world. If you just take one example, but Andrew, if you just take one example and say, you know, closing Hazlewood isn't going to make any difference, well, that's true. But if there are thousands and thousands of Hazlewoods around the world that aren't being closed down, then you have a problem. That's why the Chinese even are starting to close them down.
But looking at better technologies along the way.
Of course they
I
should
mean,
be.
really,
Yeah, of course they should.
We're in a situation where we're jumping straight to technologies that people are lobbying for, because we're bypassing all of the steps along the way that could reduce emissions in a mix.
Well, that's bad government when that happens.
No, but it's interesting.
That's bad government.
It's interesting, Parnell. It's interesting. Josh Frydenberg just then, $400 million to keep Hazlewood going versus $2 billion for a snowy scheme. And he said he wouldn't keep Hazlewood going because of the emissions. That is $1.5 billion extra just for the sake of global warming when we're broke.
Well, it also sends a mixed message when they're building the hell out of the South Australians one day because of renewable energy, and the next day they're investing $2.5 billion in something for a hydro scheme in the Snowy. You know, it's all over the place. Yeah, but that wasn't...
Parnell, what do you reckon? That's $1.5 billion wasted.
Beg your pardon, Andrew, I didn't hear that one.
That's $1.5 billion wasted because they don't want to go on the power station front. They want to go with the battery.
Yeah, look, I mean, it is a perfect example of this money flowing into a morality rather than into an outcome, which I just cannot, you know, I can't get past. Why are we seeing this in Australia in this day and age? What kind of a complicated system have we built ourselves where nobody knows what anything actually costs, where externalities are not taxed properly, where unrealistic technologies are invested in, and where nobody can really...
And for nothing.
Well,
I'm sorry, guys. I cut you off rudely.
Not for nothing.
It is. Well, do that later because I've got to go. David Spears is waiting on the other end. He'll have my guts for garters if I keep going. Parnell McGuinness and Bruce Hawker, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.